Let's begin with Banshee, exclusive to AGA Amigas like the A1200 and the CD32. This is one of the best vertical scrolling shoot-'em-ups ever made. It obviously drank inspiration from all those arcade hits back from the 80s and early 90s, but it can also bring Swift to my mind. Have you played that one? Loved it on the good old ZX Spectrum. Besides being graphically gorgeous, with weather effects and detailed animated backgrounds, and being a shoot-'em-up, we're already guessing what's coming. So expect endless enemy attack waves and tough bosses. Like many games from that era, Banshee is a difficult game, but two players can fight together to level things up. And being an Amiga exclusive, it should be known and played by every fan of the genre. The conversion of R-Type 2 to the Amiga came from the hands of Arc Developments, and what a conversion it was! It offered extremely accurate graphics and sound that truly captures the excellent feel of the original coin-op game. R-Type 2 brings extra weaponry in relation to its older brother, and as well some graphical touches and increased difficulty. And that's really the only downside to it, the extremely tough gameplay that can be frustrating at times. Even so, this is an impressive conversion of a challenging and addictive blast of a game. Another of my favorite exclusives for the Amiga, and another one released in 1994, is Ruff and Tumble, this run-and-gun frenetic platformer with that Turrican, Gunstar Heroes and Metal Slug flavor. We play the role of Ruff Rogers that, while playing around with his marbles, loses one down a rabbit hole. That supposed rabbit hole ends up teleporting Ruff to an alien planet. Isn't this an original plot or what? As said, action is frenetic and gameplay is extremely fluid. It's graphically gorgeous and the enemy characters have this awesome metallic look. There are big bosses, some nice weapons and great music and sound effects. Again, if you're a run-and-gun fanatic, you have to play this one. I've also mentioned it recently in a video related to my 10 favorite run-and-gun video games. Check it out if you've missed it. Saint Dragon was so addictive, both on the arcades and on my ZX Spectrum, but was on the Amiga that I would later further explore it. It really lacks a deeper parallax scrolling effect, but the developer who ported the game just followed the exact same template of the arcade original from Jaleco, and that was a freaking awesome achievement. The game plays and sounds practically identical to the arcade game. Graphics are superbly drawn and colored, evoking the feel of playing the coin-op original. And despite the number of sprites on screen and the sheer size of the enemies, scrolling and animation moves at a pretty smooth pace. There isn't much to say about the plot of Saint Dragon. We play a cyborg warrior who has decided to rebel against the evil and oppressive forces of our tyrannical leaders. Like in Robocop, we're part machine, part dragon, so I guess that we have feelings. And another arcade game slightly similar in style to Saint Dragon is Dragon Breed. Again, a truly faithful conversion of a complex coin-op game by Irem. This port was brought by Arc Developments, as seen the ones also responsible for the amazing conversion of R-Type 2, and as we can witness, features well-animated dragons and a not as good but still pretty solid soundtrack. We play as a prince and his personal dragon, fighting for survival during the course of 6 levels. Only the rider can be killed, so we must use the dragon's tail to ensure that the prince is safe from enemy fire. A cool feature is that we can leap off the dragon and climb the scenery to collect all sorts of power-ups like magic potions. These potions will provide extra powers to the dragon, changing its color in the process. And collecting the right power-ups to defeat the right enemies becomes a crucial task to our success and survival. Whilst the first one was just a sort of technical demo showing off what the Amiga was capable of deliver, Shadow of the Beast 2 was, for me, the first real game in the series. And despite the third chapter being my favorite one, I have also to mention this second entry in the series cause, well, it was one of my most played games back in 1990, when I was all over my Amiga 500. Again, we play as Arbron, but now in half-beast form, wandering the lands of Karamun in search of our kidnapped infant sister. Zelek, servant to Melitoth, was responsible for the kidnapping, and we have to obviously fight our way through in order to save her, solving a variety of puzzles, entering subquests, and defeat some nasty monsters. For this one, Reflections tried really hard to enhance the basic arcade action of the first game by implementing reactive enemies for improved combat scenarios, while simultaneously expanding on the adventure game component with the aforementioned puzzles, in-game dialogues with a conversation system, and an inventory that allows to select various collectible objects and weapons that we'll need to use throughout the game. Other versions were available for the Atari ST, for the Mega Drive and Mega CD, and even for the Japanese PC variant, the FM Towns, but this original Amiga version is still, for me, the beast. I mean, the best. The Lotus Esprit was a dream car back in late 80s and early 90s, so it was a good starting point for a series of video games based around the Lotus brand. So by 1990, Magnetic Fields created the first game in the franchise, Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge, released by Gremlin Graphics, being really well received by the press and gamers of the time, in where I'm obviously included cause you know how addicted I am to the racing genre. In this one, we're allowed to race a Lotus Esprit Turbo SE, imagine that, through 32 tracks. An extremely fun split-screen multiplayer mode is also available with a choice of audio tracks to go along with it. Each circuit is packed with turns and hills, and we must manage our fuel supply so that you can finish all the laps proposed, having to occasionally visit the pit stop for refueling. Besides overtaking the other opponents, we must avoid also various obstacles and hazards, depending on what scenario we're racing on. These hazards and obstacles can be in the form of slippery road surfaces with snow or puddles of water, wooden logs or roadblocks. Such an amazing game that paved the way for many that followed. Apidya 2 from German studio Kaiko, published by Playbyte in 1992, a subdivision of Blue Byte, later acquired by Ubisoft back in 2001, and highly praised for their The Settlers and Anno series. Back to Apidya 2, the first thing that stands out after loading this game is the amazing soundtrack by Chris Hulsbeck, famous for providing music for the Turrican franchise. And the manga style really shows the studio's love and passion for the artistic vision of Oriental Japanese culture regarding not only arcade and console video games, but also comics and TV animated series. We play as Ikuru that transforms himself into a deadly bee to try and rescue his wife that was poisoned by Aksai, an evil black magic lord. The gameplay mechanics were highly inspired by R-Type and Gradius, and there's a handful of levels, each composed of 3 or more stages, to blast our way through hordes of mutated enemies. The funny thing is that after playing Apidya 2, gamers would start looking for Apidya 1, but the 2 on this game's title was just a joke from the developers. And what about Pank? Another masterful conversion by Ocean France. Both the sprites and backgrounds have been superbly designed, using full color to capture the bright and cheerful appearance of the original game from Mitchell Corporation. Even when the screen is packed with balloons and creatures, the action is still swift and smooth as silk. As for sound and music, these are truly faithful to the arcade coin-op game. It's one of those titles that we just want to have a go again and again. In Pank, we embark on this journey through 18 different locations, shooting balloons as we go. A number of rounds is played at each of the locations at various times in the day. The balloons, being balloons, bounce around screens scattered with platforms and ladders, so our mission is to simply burst the balloons, destroying them completely, because these locations and their important landmarks are in danger if we don't do so. Shields and additional weapons will gradually become available to make the going a little easier, such as the Vulcan gun and the double harpoons. However, colliding with any of the various creatures that wander around disables the weapons for a short while. There's also a time limit to pop all those balloons, so better make it fast. This is probably my favorite action puzzle game ever. Rock and Roll, developed and published by Rainbow Arts in 1989, and with an awesome soundtrack by my all-time favorite composer, Chris Hulsbeck. This is a huge game in where we control a ball with a mouse and try to reach the end of each level, avoiding ventilators, magnets, arrows, and other objects that simply drains the player's energy. It's not an easy task, but it's a highly enjoyable one. The ball physics are spot on, and we have a good control over it and can easily anticipate annoying situations. It was one of my early reviews for my channel, so if you want to know more, feel free to click on the annotation in the top right of the screen. Yo-Jo was one of the few Amiga games that got the backing from a huge publisher. Hudson Soft saw the potential of the game, and Yo-Jo is indeed an amazing scrolling platformer and one of the few offering simultaneous two-player cooperative gameplay, something really uncommon in this particular genre. It doesn't have a compelling story to keep the player interested. Yo-Jo relies upon its fantastic gameplay, pure and simple. And the graphics are incredibly detailed and with huge maps to travel through. An incredible display of what the Amiga was capable of. And the music? Dance and trance were what people were listening in early 90s, and these tunes just makes me stop for a while and simply sit back and relax for a bit. By 1995, everyone was already playing Doom 2 and all clones available, but that didn't stop Audiogenic to bring this 2D game named Odyssey, a platformer with a twist. There are puzzles to solve, puzzles that generally involve doors and switches, but some areas are inaccessible to the human character. Remember when I said that this was a platformer with a twist? As the game progresses, crystals allows us to transform into other creatures like birds, spiders and grasshoppers that will open up other new areas. So Odyssey is simply about visiting the 6 islands featured in-game and composed by exterior and interior sections and getting from one place to another, solving puzzles as we go. Amiga Format Issue 75 even offered an exclusive extra training island on one of its cover discs. Team 17 was known as one of the most incredibly challenging group of people that published extraordinary Amiga titles. They have in their resume the Alien Breed and Worms franchises, and most of their initial coders and artists had a background in the Amiga demo scene. They were also known to push the Amiga to its limits, forcing its users to have 1 MB of RAM in their machines to be able to run games published by Team 17. And the audio environment, compliments from Alistair Brimble, would really immerse the player into this futuristic setting. Already reviewed in the channel, this gem was developed by Psionic Systems and originally released in 1992, having also 2 years later a special edition of the game that I consider a complete waste of time and resources. Check my review for more details. Agony wasn't just a pretty cover, it was and still is one of the greatest shoot-em-ups of all time and a true work of art. Developed by Art and Magic and published also in 1992 by Psygnosis, Agony places us in control of an owl fighting its way through 6 gorgeous-looking worlds packed with beasts and monsters. It's a really hard and demanding game, but the music and graphics compensates all the frustration. By the way, and as told on my Psygnosis retrospective, the piano intro by Tim Wright ended up being adapted without consent or credit by the Norwegian symphonic black metal band Dimmu Borgir and featured in their Stormblast album from 1996. Later, this same album was re-released without that track. Thalion Software was formed by members of the amazing Atari ST demo scene back in the 80s, and from them emerged names that nowadays are huge in the video game industry. This studio was responsible for some of the most audiovisual masterpieces ever seen on an Atari ST and the Amiga. They would push these machines to its limits and beyond. From Thalion's amazing portfolio came in 1993 Lionheart, this visually outstanding piece of programming that features differently generated environments depending on the difficulty setting chosen by the player in the beginning of the game. It's a basic hack-and-slash platform game with a super parallax scrolling effect, in where we take control of a warrior from the land of the cat people that had its origins on another Thalion exclusive Amiga game, the second title from the Amber series by the name Amber Moon. By the end of 1991, System 3 published Fuzzball, this gorgeous-looking and highly addictive puzzle platformer that came from Scan Games Norway and almost had also a C64 version. A 2-level preview was even bundled in Commodore format, but this port ended up being cancelled in the last minute due to inside conflicts. Fuzzball is also the only title developed by Scan Games Norway that had a commercial release. Despite all that, Fuzzball is for me highly addictive with beautiful graphics, music and extremely challenging gameplay. Even today when I play Fuzzball, I'm completely absorbed by it, and it's really hard to let go, cause I just want to clear one more screen again and again. And there's 50 of these, with an obvious increased level of difficulty and decorated with different styles. It can also be really frustrating, cause if we touch an enemy, we're instantly dead. There's no energy bar, so we must plan our every move really carefully, and to complicate things even more, some screens have ice over the floors. And besides all that, a clock counts down, and when the time runs out, flying insects enter the screen with the mission of hunting the player down, just like Arnie in the Terminator. These were the days when games were really challenging and finishing every single screen or level is a complete victory. Geoff Crammond is a legend in sim racing video games development, and Stunt Car Racer was the first game to offer me a realistic driving experience with its impressive physics engine. In this game, we're invited to perform some crazy stunts on a bunch of roller coaster-like elevated courses and be rewarded for doing so. It was originally published by Microstyle in 1989, and in its cover we can read the sentence "Games for Adults." What, back then, made this 14-year-old kid feel like he was a grown-up just for being able to finish every single course present in the game.
I've seen this before.
The original Turrican grabbed me right when I first saw its loading screen, cause if you're familiar with the heaviest metal band in the world, you'll be able to identify right away the similarities. It was originally developed for the Commodore 64 and was highly praised in all technical aspects. It was extremely influenced by Metroid and Psychonic's Oscar, and as you all are aware, we take control of a bioengineered warrior, originally fighting an AI antagonist called Morgul that in later games was swapped by an evil emperor called the Machine. I recall that there were some issues while converting the C64 original game to the Amiga. Rainbow Arts wanted both versions to be released at the same time, but because the Commodore 64 had a completely different architecture, another team was brought in to catch up and rewrite from scratch Turrican for the Amiga, a platform that was the most sought after in Europe by that time, in what home computers were concerned. And we can't praise Turrican solely for its beautiful graphics and top-notch gameplay. The Amiga soundtrack by Chris Hulsbeck is sure of amazing and simply goes wherever I go. Such a memorable game that should be enjoyed by every single one of you. Team 17 were the masters of exclusive games for the Amiga. Their goal was to get the most out of that amazing platform, even forcing users to have a full megabyte in their machines to be able to run their games. All-terrain racing even led to a change of letters between the developer and Future Publishing because of the review published on issue 48 of Amiga Power. The reviewer, Jonathan Nash, gave it only 38%, and that made Team 17 to join the list of companies who no longer sent review copies of their upcoming titles to that particular magazine. So, in what consists all-terrain racing? It's a top-down racer like many others from that era, with a futuristic styling thrown in, mainly in what car design is concerned. What differs ATR from the rest is the addition of shortcuts that would offer an element of strategy, cause in this game, we're invited to drift around corners and slam into the other opponents. I had so much fun with ATR back in the day, and even nowadays it's a blast to play. I have so many fond memories of playing Cabal at the arcades, and later on my good old ZX Spectrum 128K. Tried the Amiga version a couple of years later and I was once again addicted to it. In Cabal, we're behind enemy lines and have to fight through 5 levels, each with 4 stages in order to stay alive and reach safe ground. A friend can join in, and the general idea is to move our character from left to right, shooting at all the enemy soldiers that comes running on from the sides of the screen. Pressing the fire button, we're able to shoot and move around that giant site. Releasing the fire button will allow us to move the character from one place to another, running or rolling along the ground. As you've noticed, also bigger things need to be destroyed, like tanks, helicopters and trucks. Use grenades to take down these tougher opponents, but be aware that our supply is really limited. for last, one of the most satisfying thing on Cabal is the ability to also reduce those buildings to bits and pieces. So much fun and an amazing port by, again, Ocean Software. Here's another highly addictive game from this renowned publisher, PXTNG. This introductory text was present in the demo of Globdule that was offered on one of the 3 cover discs bundled with issue 33 of Amiga Power magazine, published back in January of 1994. Have you guys noticed it back then? By the time the full version was released, that error was corrected. I wonder if anyone got fired because of this. But that doesn't really matter. What matters is that Globdule is such an awesome game and almost made it to my personal top 10. It was developed by X-Animo Designs, that was in fact their only commercial Amiga game ever released, in where we just have to collect all the items within a time limit to be allowed to advance to the next level. That's it! But as a Globdule, we're stuck to surfaces, and to grab all the scattered items, we simply have to jump. Be advised that in some levels, keys must also be collected that will obviously unlock certain doors. Also, and after the first initial levels, enemies will arrive just to make it more interesting, and to kill them, simply jump in their direction. And I have to say that Globdule is one perfect example of what Amiga gaming was all about back in early 90s. Pure fun! A truly enjoyable and relaxing action platformer with lovely, vibrant and colorful graphics accompanied by a perfectly suitable soundtrack. How I love this game! This 1993 platform and puzzle title, first released for the Amiga computer, was so damn enjoyable and addictive that when I moved to IBM PCs later that year, I just had to get also the DOS version. And I still remember that annoying disk swapping process that Amiga users like myself had to stand. Even so, playing the Amiga version with a Maverick 1 arcade stick is phenomenal. A year later, an Amiga CD32 option was also available that would offer a couple more audio tracks and obviously faster loading times in relation to its older brother. Fury of the Furries was developed by the French studio Esprit Concept, soon renamed to Callisto, and first published by Mindscape in 1993. We control a furry creature that has the ability to transform itself into 4 different colored forms: red, blue, green and yellow, colors that indicates different skills that are needed at certain points during our journey across the 8 main locations present in the game: desert, lagoon, forest, pyramids, mountains, factory, village and a castle, each with 10 levels plus bonus levels. But not all forms are available in all the different levels. In those more puzzle-oriented, we may come across fields which deactivate certain powers. Besides the amazing gameplay, it also offers awesome music, graphics and even references to other video games and movies. Every single one of you should try it, if you're in the mood for some relaxing puzzle platforming, obviously. Now for a clone of Bubble Bobble, I present you Super Methane Brothers. But don't let the word clone scare you. Yes, it's a clone of Bubble Bobble, but it's a freaking good one. Apache Software developed and released by 1993 this highly addictive action platformer, again for all Amiga computers and the CD32, being also well received by the gaming press of the time. The gameplay is simple. Go through all the 100 screens or levels, absorbing all those annoying bugs with our methane gun and shooting them against the wall. All this within a time limit. That's it, so simple. And that's what makes it addictive, Bubble Bobble style. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. And some of you will stop me right here and yell, Super Methane Brothers was ported to Windows, Linux, RISC OS and even iOS. Yes, it was, but it was under a general public license and for free, so the Amiga original is technically still a commercial exclusive release. This intro tune really sets the mood for things to come. Yeah. Roadkill is one of the greatest top-down racing games from its generation, with amazing sound, graphics, and an overwhelming parallax scrolling that reminds me of the very first Micro Machines released a few years before. Vision Software developed this futuristic racing game in where all sorts of weapons can be used against the other 9 opponents. Yes, 9! Nowadays we see this style of gameplay all over the place, and besides Roadkill, Revolt was and still is another favorite of mine, but on the PC and Dreamcast that was released 4 years later. There's no 4th place in Roadkill. We must finish every race in the top 3 spots available at the podium, and the higher we finish, the more cash we get. Even during the race we can go for the jackpot and even super jackpot, destroying completely all the other racers on track. Yeah, bring it on! This one is only available for AGA machines like the Amiga 1200 or 4000 and for the Amiga CD32. Remember Soccer Kid? Arabian Nights came right after and from the same developer, Chrysalis Software, who also published it. It's another fast and fluid platformer, really fun to play and with a pretty cool soundtrack to keep you motivated to overcome those more difficult areas. In this one we play as Sinbad Jr., who is a gardener at the royal palace and loves to sneak a peek at the princess from time to time, you naughty boy! But one day he sees a demonic creature kidnapping the princess, so when he was about to save her, he ended up caught by the palace guards and thrown in the dungeon. We must help Sinbad Jr. to fight his way out of the dungeon and through various other different and well-crafted environments, which include flying on the magic carpet and even racing in a minecart Indiana Jones style. It was released in 1993, initially on 2 floppy disks and later on CD for the Amiga CD32. The animation is as smooth as the best platformers seen on consoles by that time, and the controls are sharp and accurate, also making good use of the second fire button. Highly addictive and a must-play to everyone. Silkworm is probably the best example of a game that is better on the Amiga than on its original ground. This explosive action can be experienced by 2 players simultaneously, one controlling an helicopter and the other a jeep, paired with a freaking huge machine gun. The arcade original is faithfully represented with sharp and smooth graphics, along with tight controls with the most perfect collision detection. There are tons of opponents to destroy, and at the bottom there's an indicator which tells us how many enemies we have already destroyed. When this indicator reaches 0, a bigger enemy will appear and destroying it, power-ups will be dropped for us to collect and continue our mission. Random access and the sales curve were the ones responsible for this incredible port that would offer us a couple of years later the also amazing Swiv, a sort of unofficial sequel to Silkworm. It really must be experienced by 2 players simultaneously, helping each other out, destroying the vast array of opponents. Sound effects complement the graphics wonderfully, and we only need to get halfway into the first level to witness all the chaos and destruction, with the screen packed with missiles, planes, tanks and helicopters. Can we survive this? Another astonishing port by the sales curve from an arcade original. Rodland let us play with the fairies Rit and Tam on a quest to rescue their mother. They're armed with their magical wand that we must use against the enemy. Instead of jumping, we can magically place ladders anywhere, and doing so avoid being captured. 44 levels awaits the player, and everything's done with a cartoonish sense of exaggeration. Bombs explode in a huge multicolored flash with boom in the middle. Enemies are killed by impaling them on the end of the magic rod and smashing them from side to side on the ground with extreme violence. Such a cute game. Rodland looks gorgeous, sounds gorgeous, plays like a dream, even being kind of repetitive. But it's what this game is all about. It simply doesn't care about being repetitive or with no depth at all. It's fun, that's what really matters, and I must finish by saying that it's one of the most accurate and perfect arcade-like experiences on the Amiga. If you've played Uridium and Paradroid back in the 8-bit glory days of home computing, you're obviously familiar with Graphicol's amazing work, so it was with no surprise that the 16-bit technology would be a gift from the gods for such a talented developer. Their Amiga catalog would include games like Fire and Ice and Rainbow Islands, but there was this one gem that would pass under the radar for many players, mainly because it arrived a bit late by 1995, by a time when few were still playing around with the system. Virocop was supposed to be a sort of shoot-'em-up with tanks, but rapidly evolved to a virtual world in where we take control of Dave, our digital armored virus exterminator that floats around these maze-like levels, destroying viruses. And as a side note, this Dave unit was based on Graphicol's own KLP2 that appeared in their Spectrum game Quasitron. Remember that one? It was initially developed for the Amiga 500, but there was also an enhanced AGA version for the Amiga 1200, which included a whole new world. It was Graphicol's final and exclusive game for the Amiga. Qwak is a cute platformer designed by Jamie Woodhouse and initially released in '89 for the BBC Micro and the Acorn Electron. 4 years later, by 1993, was given a special treatment and was updated and enhanced for the good old Commodore Amiga, being also available later that year for the CD32. It features ducks who throw eggs at their opponents. It's a pretty common concept by that time, and it manages to get everything just right, something that many couldn't simply achieve. Each level is composed of one single screen in size, but the compact graphics manage to pack in a lot of detail. The goal is to collect keys, avoiding enemies, and escape through the exit. A second player can join in and toss his own eggs. It was sold as a mid-range title, but it was way superior to many full-priced games that would cost twice as much. A couple of decades later, was ported to the Game Boy Advance, and there are also Mac, Windows and iOS versions available. And what about an isometric adventure game exclusive to the Amiga? Zero Hour Software developed Darkmere, The Nightmares Begun, that was grabbed by Core Design, who published it in 1993. An Atari ST version was also planned, but due to another year of poor sales of Atari machines, it was eventually cancelled. So, once again, Amiga users would get another great and truly immersive exclusive game. With 3 huge levels to explore, combined with an inspiring and breathtaking atmosphere, Darkmere places us in control of the Prince Abrin across multiple roads, paths and rooms, through the unnamed village, the forests beyond, and the dark caverns. It all sounds like Lord of the Rings, and the developer was probably inspired by Tolkien's amazing universe, so it's no surprise that orcs and other creatures wander around. We must confront and defeat these beasts in order to continue our journey, solving tasks and quests along the way. A truly immersive exclusive action RPG on the Amiga that was praised by everyone who played it, highlighting the quality of its graphics, artwork, animation and atmosphere with its gloomy and dark ambience. And here you have it, games that offer a better experience on the Amiga, being many of them exclusive to the platform, and that should be played by everyone. Tell me down in the comments section below which ones you've played, and feel free to share with all of us your personal favorites that aren't included in this list. There are a ton more out there that deserves a shout out, so if you've enjoyed this video, you know the drill. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in my next video. Cheers!